Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course Programming Language Concept. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the pointers. Remember, pointers are one of the most important topics in C as well as in C++. So, because C and C++ mostly use pointers for memory management. So, in today's lecture, first of all, we are going to look at the background of the pointers, and then we will see that what pointer is, and then we will see some example. So first of all, as I told you that we need to understand the background for pointers. Remember, look at the first point. As we know that there are three basic data type: integer, character, and float. You already know about these data types. If you want to store integer value in a variable, then you have to declare an integer variable. Similarly, if you want to store a character in a variable, then you have to declare a character variable. And the same goes for the float. If you want to store a decimal point number, then you have to declare a variable with float data type. Now, as a variable having integer data type can only store integer type of values. This is already understood to you because you have practiced on these different things. You have worked on different programs where you have used integer data type because you declare integer variable and then you store some values in the integer variable. So a variable of character data type can only store character values, and in the same way a float data type variable can only store float values. Now you already have the understanding of these three different basic data types, and you know that what type of value you are going to store in these individual data types. Now it means that neither of the above data types, like the integer, float, and character, they can store the hexadecimal values which are in the following format. Now in your IT course, information technology course, you might have learned the hexadecimal values or decimal values or the binary values. Normally what happens that when you are going to uh, declare a variable, so the memory will be reserved for that particular variable, and then it will be associated with an address. So that address is in the form of the hexadecimal value. Now, none of these above data types like integer, float, and character, they are able to store this hexadecimal format number. So now what is the solution? The solution is obviously the pointer, but let's see some other things before discussing pointer. Now when we declare and initialize a variable, then we have to keep in mind three things. Three things should be keep in mind. Number one, name of the variable. Remember, when you declare a variable, like for example in this case integer x, so name of the variable in this case is x, value of the variable in this case that is 10, and address of variable that is this hexadecimal format. Remember, as we have talked about the variable, that variable is a memory location. So every variable that you declare will have its own address. So that's why three things must be kept in your mind. The first one, name of the variable, the value of the variable, and address of the variable. If let's suppose you declare and you initialize a variable like this, in this case x will be assigned a special or a unique address where the compiler is going to access this x variable because of this address. So as the addresses of each variable are in hexadecimal, so we cannot store these addresses in ordinary variables and thus need some special variable. So the thing here is that we cannot store these addresses. Sometimes we need to manipulate these addresses, or sometimes we need to utilize or use these addresses for our own advantage. Now, what we cannot do is that we cannot store these addresses in ordinary variable like this. So what is the solution? The solution is For this, we need to have a special variable. Now let's try to understand that what is pointer. Remember, pointer is a special type of variable. Keep this thing in your mind. Just like we saw variables of integer, float, and character, so pointer is also a kind of a special type of variable which is used to store the addresses of some other variables. As I told you that sometimes we need to directly access the memory locations. So for this reason, what we do is we basically use a special variable in order to store the addresses of those other variables. Now the compiler treats the pointer differently from other variables, but it is a variable and variable is a memory location, so the compiler also reserve some memory space for pointers. Now again, this thing should be in your mind that pointer is a special variable and it store the addresses of other variables. That's why, because pointer is a variable, that's why memory location must be reserved for this particular special variable. So the compiler is going to reserve the memory location for the pointers, just like the compiler is reserving memory space or memory location for other variables. So let's try to understand. The first point is that how to declare the pointer. Now for this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the dev C++ IDE. So I have to open this IDE and I have to, as usual, I have to include the header files, okay? Header file, that is iostream, and then I have to use the standard namespace, and after this I have to use main. Now how can I declare, the question is how can I declare pointer? So pointer can be declared two ways. For example, you can declare pointer like this, int and then star and then ptr. So in this case, ptr is what? Ptr is basically the memory, the name of the pointer, okay? Or in other words, we can say that this is basically the pointer variable. So one way is this. The other way for declaring variable is like this. For example, p is one variable, and this is not ordinary variable. Remember, this is a special variable. This special variable is known as pointer. So basically, you can either use this way to declare pointer or this way to declare pointer. So keep these things in your mind. Now, coming back to the slides, here we can see that we can declare the pointer variable in the program by the following statement. There are type, okay, that is the integer, and then star, that is obviously the representation for the pointer, and then variable. Remember, you have to keep one more point in your mind, and that is that because this pointer is also also a kind of identifier, just like we saw the identifier, like function is identifier, array is identifier, name of the array is identifier, name of the variable is identifier, and name of the function is identifier. So you need to keep the same rules for the same rules of identifier for declaring the pointer as well. So going back to the function, going back to the slide, now the star will tell the compiler that it is not ordinary variable but a pointer variable. Now this is the thing that here how the compiler is going to discern or recognize that it is a pointer variable and it is not ordinary variable. So we have used asterisk, and this asterisk is used for declaring the pointer variable in the program. So moving to the example, now you can see we have used int star int x and then 10, and then here we have got int star ptr, and then this is pointer variable, this is ordinary variable, and this is how we basically store the address of this x in ptr variable. So let's try to write a program um, for I for identifying the addresses of a variable. For example, this is a simple variable, and we have initialized this variable with a value of 10. Now, what happens if you want to print the address, but before address, we would like to print the value of x. We would like to print the value of x. Now, this is the normal way uh, that you are going to display the value that is stored in variable x. So when you run this program, it is going to display us let me create another folder for this folder, pointer. So pointer program number 1, we would call this as prog1. Now program number 1, in case of pointer, now see, this is how this is basically the result of this program. You can see we have initialized a variable, and just after initialization of this variable, I have used another statement to print the value. Oh my god, I have to print x instead of directly value. So here you can see value of x, that is what? That is 10. You can see in x we have stored 10. But the question is, how can we print the address of this x variable? As I told you that every variable, when you declare this variable, the compiler is going to reserve a memory space, okay? That memory space is going to be accessed through an address, okay? So the same way, like we can have the address of our friend. If we want to go somewhere, then friends gives us some address, and then we go to their home directly if we do have the address of our friend. So the same way, what we do in this programming is that we can also like print the address of this each and every variable. So for example, addresses can be printed like this, but before this, let me print a small address of x that's equal to this and like this. So address of x. Now this symbol, this and symbol, this is called as the address of operator. This is called as address of operator. So this address of operator is used to print the address of any variable. In this case, the variable is x, so I'm going to print the address of x. Now let's see what happens. See, this is the address. So we have printed the address of x as well. Now we are going to use the same address of x, the same address of operator when we are assigning the address of one variable to a pointer variable. Fine. So I hope that you have learned this concept. Let us declare another variable, and let's assume that the variable name is n. So what we did here, we basically declare a variable. Now I'm going to initialize. In fact, I'm going to initialize this variable, and that is from the value 100. So 100 is the value, and this value is stored in variable n. Now I'm going to declare another variable, and that this time I'm going to declare pointer variable. So this is a special variable, and in this variable, what we do is we are going to store the address of variable n. Okay, so how can we store the address? We have to use p, which is pointer variable, and then we have to use address of n. Now this address of n means that we have assigned the address of n into p. Fine. So this is basically how we store the address of one variable in another variable, and that is in pointer variable. So when you now let us print these things. First of all, I would like to print the value of n. Okay, the value of n, that is what? That is, let's assume we have to print this n, and then let us try to print the address of n, that's equal to uh, address address of operator, and then we have to use n. And after this, let's try to print the p, okay, and see that what will be the value of this p, okay, address of n using pointer. Let me use using pointer. So now what we do is we are going to print the address of this n using pointer variable. Now we know that the address of this n is stored in this pointer variable. So we can simply write p, it is going to print us the address of n. So let us try to run this program and see the result on the screen. Now remember, value of n, it is basically uh, because of the statement cout value of n, we have printed this thing, the value of n, and then we have printed the address of n. Now you can see the address of n, that is what? That is 0x6FFE04. And then you can see address of n using pointer p, 0x6 FFE04. You can see both this address and the value of P, which is the address of this, they are same. Okay. So now, as I told you that because this pointer is an address, okay, pointer is a variable, that's why it will also have its own address. So let us try to print the address of this pointer variable address. We would call this address of P. So address of P would be the address of operator, and then we are going to write this P. Now it is going to print us the address of P. So let's try to run this program once again. Now you can see this address is different than both of these addresses. Remember, this is the value of n and that is stored, okay? Now this is the value of P, okay? This is the value of P. Now what we stored in the value of P? Obviously the address of n. And this is basically the address of P, which is pointer variable. So pointer variable has its own address. The ordinary variable has its own address. And we store this address in the pointer variable like this. Okay, you can see this, both of these addresses, they are same. Okay, and then this is different, fine. So this is how you are going to work with pointers. Now let us go back to the slide. In the slide, let us see the memory mapping. Now memory mapping, this pointer holds the address of variable x. The statement that assigns the address of x to pointer is, this is the statement, address of x. We assign the address of x to ptr variable, which is a pointer variable. Remember, we had this variable and we stored 10, and then it has its own address. So this address is stored in ptr variable, okay, which is a pointer variable. And this ptr variable has its own address, which is this one, okay. So these are what? These are the hexadecimal values. Now with the help of ptr, we can also access the value of x. We will see we can also access the value of this x, which is 10, using pointer. Because pointer has the address of x, and because of this reason we can directly access this value which is stored in variable x, because we know the address of x, fine. So this is how the memory mapping of ordinary variable and the pointer variable. Now what are star and this operators, okay, or this symbol, star and ends operator, okay. So when we're dealing with pointers, we use these two operators. Number one, this symbol is known as address of operator. This symbol is known as value at the address of operator, okay. So this is called what? This is the value at the address of operator, and this means that the address of operator, okay. So value at the address of any variable, okay. So value at the address of x means address of x, sorry, this particular symbol means address of x, okay, and this means value at the address of x, because we have used star with pointer variable. We're going to work on this right now to access the value of variable n. Okay, let me close this thing. Now, how can we access the value of n using pointer variable? So we can write a simple message, value of n using pointer variable. Now, how can we do this? We can do this by simply using this operator, and this operator is called as value at the address of. Value at the address of PTR, because in PTR we have stored the address of x, okay, and that's why the compiler is going to access the address of x, and then it is going to fetch the value, and it's going to print us on the screen. So this is also called as indirect operator, or in other words, we call this as the dereference operator. Okay, we call this as dereference operator. So let us try to run this program, and okay, PTR, instead we have to use P because we have declared the pointer with star P. Now let's try to run this program. You can see 100 is printed. Value of n using pointer variable, that is 100. Now you can see, first of all, you printed the value of n, that is 100, and then the address is printed. The address of n is printed, and then what we did, we basically print the address of n using pointer, and then we print the address of pointer variable itself, and here we have printed the value of n using pointer, and that is 10, because as I told you, and pointer, what we had the address of n. That's why it becomes quite easy to access the address and fetch the value, and then print the value on the screen. So this is actually the working of the pointers, and this is how pointers are working. Now there is a very simple question that may arise in your mind. The question is that what star used for pointer and for multiplication both? Now this is, you need to understand, for this you need to understand the difference. Now a question arises in the minds of students that if star used for multiplication of two numbers, like you use a star b, then how can we use it for declaring pointer variable? This might be a question in your mind. Will the compiler not be confused about its usage? So the answer is definitely no, because when the operator comes with two operands, then it is considered as binary operator, and in that case the compiler uses it for multiplication. But when it is used with one operator, with one operand, then it is act as unary operator, and in this case the compiler consider it as value at the address of operator and will use it for pointer notation. Now remember, like, let me use this star with for multiplication, okay, for example a star b. Now in this case, this compiler will treat star as the compiler will treat star as binary operator, because it basically works on two operands. But when you use it with a single operator, with single operand like this, okay, now here this is single operand, okay, and we have used this star. So that's why in this case compiler will think that this is variable, but in this case, because this is binary operator, this will act as a binary operator. That's why compiler will think that it is used for multiplication, but in this case we have used it for as a unary operator, okay. So this is basically the thing that we have to understand about the star for pointer as well as for multiplication. Now again the same thing here, the star used for pointer and multiplication both. So A star B here, it is used between two operands A and B. It is binary operator here, used for multiplication, but here it is used for declaring pointer. Here it is used with one operator, so it is a unary operator. Now, what does int mean? Remember, in this particular program that I wrote here, what I did, I basically use int star p. Now, in this case, it is all right. You know that basically I'm going to declare a variable, and this variable is going to hold an integer value. But in this case, there is a little bit explanation. So you have to keep this thing in your mind, that it doesn't mean that this star p is going to store uh, an integer value. Okay, so let's try to look at the slide and then we will come back. Now, what does int mean in context of pointer? While declaring the pointer variable, we first put its data type as under, okay? Int and then star ptr. So this int doesn't mean that it will hold an integer value. What it means is that here the meaning of int changes, and it means that the pointer ptr can hold the address of any variable whose data type is int. Thus, it cannot hold the address of those variables whose data type is other than int. Now, for this, let us go back to the dev C++. For example, in this case, you have declared a variable float, let us see, float a, okay, float n and 10.5. So assuming this thing, and now you can see there is an error. Why? Here, look at the error, cannot convert float to int in assignment. Now, this means that the data type of n is what? The data type of n is float, while the data type of this pointer, that is integer. It means if you have declared a pointer with integer data type, then you can only store the address of integer data type variables. Okay, you cannot store the other data type variable addresses in this integer. So for this, you can use a float, fine, not integer, float. Now it will not give us any error. Okay, you can see that is done, fine. So this is what int mean. Int doesn't mean that okay, it doesn't mean that it is going to hold an integer value, but what it means is, it means that the pointer ptr can hold the address of any variable whose data type is int. Okay, so keep this thing in your mind. This is very much compulsory and this is very much important. Thus, it can hold the address of those variables whose data type is other than int. Okay, so it cannot hold the address of those variable whose data type is, let's suppose, char or float. Like in this case, we did a simple program. Let me go back, okay, and let me declare a floating point variable, okay, float a. And then what I do, I'm going to declare a pointer variable of type int. So what does this mean? It means like this, address of a. Now in this case, the compiler is going to give us error. Why? Because the pointer is of type int, okay? It points to an integer variable. But here there is no integer variable. So that's why it's going to give you error. See, there is error. So what is the solution? The solution is to use here the integer variable. Now perfectly okay, and there will be no problem at all. Okay, so this is what, this is actually the pointer. Now let us go back to the slides. Simple program using pointer. I hope that I think I have explained. I'm 100% sure, not think actually, that the program has been written there before, so you can use this and you can practice on this again and again so that you can have a stronghold on the pointer, because we're going to use pointer when we are discussing call by reference in function. Okay, for this reason the pointer is very much important. So let's try to write this program once again using pointer. First of all, what I'm going to do, let's assume we have declared a variable and we have initialized and fixed variable x with a value 10. So then I'm going to use pointer, okay, and this time I'm going to use this way ptr, okay. And now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to store the address of x, okay, using pointer. So we are going to take the address of x and assign it to pointer. So after this, you can see we have to print the value, okay, value of x that's equal to x. If you want to print the value of x, which is 10, you have to use this statement. If you want to print the address of x, okay, address of x, then you can again use the address of operator. If you want to print the address, of x using pointer, then we have to use ptr, okay, address of x using pointer, So here we have this ptr, which is pointer variable, and it has stored the address of x. Now comes to the next point, and that is to print the address of pointer variable, okay. How can we print the address? So obviously address of operator and then this sign. After this, cout address of, sorry, value, okay, yeah, value of what? Value of pointer variable. So let's try to see the value of pointer variable. What is stored in the pointer variable? This is how we can print the value of ptr, just like we were basically using this way to print the value of x. So the same way we can use this way. Another thing is to use the dereference operator. So value of x using pointer variable, okay. Now what we need to do, we need to use this statement print. And now let's try to run this program and see the result on the screen. Here you can see value of x, that is x, which is 10. Now this is the address of x. Address of x is what? 0x6 double fe0c. And then we have printed the address of x using pointer. So address of x using pointer. See, both of these addresses, they are equal. Now address of pointer variable, this is the address of ptr variable, and this is the value of pointer, which is basically the address of x. So this address and the value of ptr, they are basically the same. And then we have accessed the value of x using pointer. So this is something about the pointer. I hope you have understood the concept of pointer, and if not, then you can ask your question.